History isn't just about wars and politics, it's also about love. And sometimes that love is absolutely insane. From a queen who married her own guard just hours after her king died, to a soldier who crossed deserts for a kiss, to an emperor who built a wonder of the world for his dead wife. These stories are proof that passion can make people do the wildest things. Today, we're counting down the 10 craziest love stories in history. Starting the love stories at number 10, they say love can make you do crazy things, but Napoleon Bonaparte and Joséphine de Beauharnais took crazy to historic levels. It's 1795. Napoleon is a rising military star, ambitious, intense, and just 26 years old. Joséphine, she's 32, a glamorous widow with powerful friends, a sharp mind, and a massive amount of debt. When they meet, Napoleon is instantly obsessed. He writes her some of the most passionate and awkward love letters in history. "I awake full of you," he says in one. Romantic, until you realize he sent them while leading battles across Europe. They marry in 1796, but here's the twist. Joséphine is late to her own wedding, and she even lies about her age on the certificate. While Napoleon is away conquering lands, Joséphine is rumored to be entertaining other men. When Napoleon finds out, he's furious, but instead of leaving her, he has his own affairs. Still, their bond is wild. He calls her his guiding star and refuses to let go, even when politics demand an heir. In 1810, heartbroken, he divorces her, but insists she keep the title Empress. Even after remarrying, Napoleon would whisper her name before battles. When Joséphine dies in 1814, Napoleon reportedly said, "I truly loved my Joséphine. I die with that thought." Their story? A mix of obsession, betrayal, and devotion. Proof that even history's greatest conqueror couldn't conquer love. Coming up next at number 9. In 1936, King Edward VIII sat on the British throne, young, charming, and loved by the public. He had the world at his feet. But then he met Wallis Simpson, an American socialite who was bold, witty, and, most importantly, already married. Their chemistry was instant, their connection undeniable, and their romance completely scandalous. You see, Wallis wasn't just divorced once, she was on her second marriage. In the eyes of the Church of England, which the king himself was sworn to lead, that made her completely unacceptable as a royal bride. But Edward didn't care. He wasn't about to let centuries of royal tradition, the outrage of Parliament, or the fury of the British public get between him and the woman he loved. In a move that shocked the world, Edward made the ultimate choice: love over crown. He abdicated the throne, the first British monarch to ever willingly step down, and handed the crown to his younger brother, George VI. In his own words, he declared, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of kingship without the help and support of the woman I love." The couple married in 1937 and spent the rest of their lives in a glamorous, globe-trotting exile. To some, it was the most romantic gesture in history. To others, it was reckless, selfish, even foolish. But one thing is certain: Edward and Wallis rewrote the rules of royal love, proving that sometimes passion can shake the very foundations of a kingdom. Next up at number 8, they were called the Elephant and the Dove. Not exactly your typical couple nickname, but then again, Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera were anything but typical. He was Mexico's most famous muralist, a towering man with an even bigger ego, and she was the fierce, unflinching painter whose art bled raw emotion. When they met in 1928, Diego was already a legend and a notorious womanizer. Frida knew his reputation, yet she was drawn to him like paint to canvas. They married a year later, beginning a love story that was equal parts passion and chaos. They fought like wildfire, cheating scandals, explosive arguments, even divorcing once in 1939, only to remarry the very next year. Frida had affairs with both men and women, including the famous revolutionary Leon Trotsky. Diego, he once had an affair with Frida's own sister, and yet they could never truly let each other go. They fueled each other's art, inspired each other's politics, and loved each other with a stubborn, almost dangerous devotion. When Frida died in 1954, Diego said it was the most tragic day of his life, admitting he'd realized too late that the greatest part of his being was hers. It was messy, it was beautiful, it was infuriating, and it's still remembered as one of the wildest, most unforgettable romances in art history. Because sometimes, love isn't about perfection. It's about finding someone whose chaos matches your own. Up next at number 7, imagine a love so wild it could topple empires, and nearly did. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, wasn't just a queen, she was a master of charm, wit, and political genius. Mark Antony, Rome's fearless general, was equally legendary, bold on the battlefield, but hopeless when it came to matters of the heart. Their story begins in 41 BC, when Antony summoned Cleopatra to answer political questions, but instead, she sailed up the Nile like a goddess. Gold sails, scented air, jewels glittering. This was no meeting, this was an entrance. Antony was hooked instantly. But this wasn't just romance, it was an alliance. Together, they defied the most powerful man in the world, Octavian, ruler of Rome. They threw lavish feasts dressed as gods, and even formed their own drinking club called the Inimitable Livers. It was passion, power, and politics all tangled into one. The problem? Rome didn't approve. Their love became a threat to the empire. empire, and war was inevitable. In 31 BC, at the Battle of Actium, their forces were crushed. Faced with defeat, Antony fell on his sword, and Cleopatra followed, sealing their tragic end. In the end, they weren't just lovers, they were a storm that shook the ancient world. A romance so intense, people still talk about it over 2,000 years later. Up next at number 6, imagine a love so fiery, it could rival a Hollywood blockbuster. And in this story, it actually did. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton weren't just actors, they were a tempest, a whirlwind romance that had the world captivated. From the moment they met on the set of Cleopatra in 1962, sparks flew, and not the kind you could put out with a fire extinguisher. Taylor, already a movie legend, and Burton, a charismatic heartthrob, were both married to other people, but fate didn't care. Their chemistry was electric, on screen and off. Their love was legendary, but chaotic. Public scandals, explosive fights, and lavish gifts became their signature. Burton once gave Taylor a $1 million diamond ring, the kind of gift that made tabloids lose their minds. They married, divorced, and remarried, proving that even the most volatile love can't resist its pull. Friends, enemies, and the media couldn't look away. They were obsessed. But behind the glamour and the drama, there was a real passion, an intensity that made their love unforgettable. Two powerful personalities clashing and colliding, yet somehow creating magic every time they came together. Elizabeth and Richard didn't just love, they burned, laughed, fought, and conquered the world together, leaving behind one of the craziest, most unforgettable love stories in history. Halfway there, at number 5, imagine a king so obsessed with a woman that he changed the entire religion of his country just to marry her, only to later have her executed. This isn't a medieval soap opera. It's the real story of King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, one of the wildest love affairs in history. When Henry VIII first met Anne Boleyn in the 1520s, she wasn't your typical court beauty. Anne was sharp, confident, and knew exactly how to keep a king interested. She refused to be just another mistress. No, Anne wanted the crown. And Henry? Well, he was smitten, obsessed even. But there was one problem. Henry was already married to Catherine of Aragon. The Catholic Church said divorce was a sin, but Henry wasn't the type to take no for an answer. So in the ultimate display of "I'll do anything for love," Henry broke from the Pope, created the Church of England, and made himself the boss of religion in his realm, just so he could marry Anne. For a brief moment, it was pure passion and power. Anne became queen, and Henry expected her to give him a male heir. But when Anne failed to produce a son, giving birth instead to Elizabeth, the future queen, Henry's fiery love began to turn cold. Soon, whispers of infidelity and treason filled the court. Whether the accusations were true or not didn't matter. In 1536, just 3 years after becoming queen, Anne Boleyn was executed, beheaded on Henry's orders. Their love story began with charm, wit, and an unstoppable attraction, and ended in betrayal, blood, and one of the most dramatic political shakeups in history. Henry didn't just lose a wife, he changed the course of England forever. So, was it love, obsession, or just a dangerous game neither could win? In Henry and Anne's case, maybe all three. Up next at number 4, imagine loving someone so deeply, you decide to build a monument so grand, so perfect, that it will keep their memory alive for eternity. No, this isn't a fairy tale, it's a true story. The Taj Mahal isn't just one of the world's most beautiful buildings, it's the result of one of the most passionate and maybe craziest love stories in history. In the 1600s, Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan ruled India, powerful, rich, feared by his enemies, but when it came to love, he was hopelessly devoted to one woman, Mumtaz Mahal. She wasn't just his queen, she was his best friend, his advisor, his partner in everything. They had 14 children together, and she even followed him into military campaigns, because being apart was unthinkable. But in 1631, tragedy struck. Mumtaz died while giving birth to their 14th child. Shah Jahan was shattered. Legend says he locked himself away, refusing to eat, his hair turning white from grief in just weeks. But grief soon turned into an idea so massive it would take over 20 years, 20,000 workers, and materials from all over Asia to complete the Taj Mahal. Built entirely of shimmering white marble with perfect symmetry and breathtaking gardens, the Taj wasn't just a tomb, it was Shah Jahan's way of saying, "My love will outlive me." And it did. Ironically, Shah Jahan never got to finish his life beside Mumtaz. His own son overthrew him, locking him in a tower where for 8 years he could only gaze at the Taj Mahal from a window until he died. Then his body was placed next to hers, at last reunited. Today, millions visit the Taj Mahal, snapping photos, marveling at its beauty. But behind the postcard image is a story of obsession, grief, and a love so intense it moved mountains, literally. The Taj isn't just a wonder of the world, it's proof that sometimes love leaves monuments behind. Next up at number 3, imagine being the most famous wit in London, dazzling crowds with your charm, only to throw it all away for one intoxicating, impossible love affair. This is the story of Oscar Wilde and Lord Alfred Douglas, a romance so passionate, so scandalous, it ended in prison, ruin, and yet somehow eternal fame. Oscar Wilde Wild was already a literary superstar in the 1890s. Playwright, poet, fashion icon, he could walk into a room and have every head turn. Then, in 1891, he met Lord Alfred Douglas, or Bosie as he was nicknamed, a 21-year-old aristocrat with golden hair, striking looks, and a dangerously impulsive personality. Wilde was 37, married with children, and very aware that in Victorian England, being openly gay was not just frowned upon, it was a crime. But Bosie had no interest in caution. Their love was intense, lavish, and chaotic. They traveled together, exchanged passionate letters dripping with poetry and desire, and burned through Wilde's money on fine dining, champagne, and gifts. But Bosie also had a flair for drama and enemies. When his father, the Marquess of Queensberry, accused Wilde of posing as a sodomite, Wilde, egged on by Bosie, decided to sue him for libel. Big mistake. The trial turned Wilde's private life into public scandal. The evidence? His love letters. The result? Wilde was convicted of gross indecency and sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. The affair destroyed Wilde's career, his health, and his reputation. Yet, even after prison, Wilde and Bosie reunited briefly before their fiery personalities clashed again. Their relationship was toxic, magnetic, and unforgettable. Coming up next at number 2, picture this. One of the world's most famous poets, a Nobel Prize winner, and the voice of a nation, risking everything for a love so forbidden, it had to be hidden between the lines of his poetry. This is the scandalous, passionate, and downright wild love story of Pablo Neruda and Matilde Urrutia, a romance that burned through secrecy, exile, and political chaos, and somehow survived it all. Pablo Neruda was already a literary icon in Chile when he met Matilde in the early 1940s. The problem? He was very much married. And Matilde, she wasn't looking to become someone's secret. But Neruda was relentless, showering her with letters, stolen moments, and verses so beautiful they could melt steel. Their love affair was a game of shadows. They'd meet in hidden apartments or slip away to the Chilean countryside, always careful to dodge the eyes of the press, the government, and Neruda's own wife. Some of his most famous love poems, including in the Captain's verses, were secretly about Matilde, though the public wouldn't know for years. In 1948, political turmoil forced Neruda into exile. And here's where the story gets even crazier. Matilde risked everything to help him escape the country, hiding him in safe houses and keeping his trail cold. They were apart for years, but the letters never stopped, passionate, fiery, and sometimes a little over the top. Finally, after over a decade of secrecy, Neruda divorced his wife and married Matilde in 1966. By then, she had not only become his muse, but his rock through illness, fame, and politics. At last but not least, imagine a Roman emperor who treated the empire like his personal stage, rewrote the rules of love, and left historians gasping centuries later. This is the story of Emperor Elagabalus, a teenage ruler infamous for extravagance, scandal, and one of the most unpredictable romances in history. His partner, not a queen or noblewoman, but a former slave and chariot racer named Hierocles. Together, they didn't just break boundaries, they shattered them. Elagabalus became emperor at just 14 years old in 218 AD. And from the moment he took the throne, he refused to play by Rome's rules. While most emperors sought power through politics and war, Elagabalus sought it through spectacle, extravagant feasts, wild costumes, and religious rituals that baffled the Senate. But what shocked Rome the most wasn't his politics, it was his love life. Hierocles was a young, athletic chariot racer from Caria, and by all accounts, he was strikingly handsome. When Elagabalus saw him compete, it wasn't just admiration, it was obsession. The emperor made him his favorite, showering him with riches, titles, and something unheard of, public displays of affection. And here's the twist. Elagabalus didn't just keep Hierocles as a lover in the shadows. He allegedly married him. In a time where Rome valued masculine, stoic leaders, Elagabalus embraced the role of a Roman bride, even insisting on being called Hierocles' wife. Ancient writers, both scandalized and fascinated, claimed the emperor would refer to Hierocles as his husband and himself as the queen. The Romans were outraged. Senators whispered, generals rolled their eyes, but Elagabalus didn't care. He lived for the drama, turning his personal life into an open rebellion against tradition. In the end, his boldness caught up with him. At just 18, Elagabalus was assassinated, and Hierocles' fate vanished into history's shadows. Their love story wasn't just about romance, it was about defiance. In a world obsessed with control, Emperor Elagabalus and Hierocles dared to live unapologetically, and that's why nearly 1,800 years later, their wild, taboo-breaking love still makes history blush.